In a chilly little town called Frostyvale, where the snowflakes giggled as they fell and the ponds sparkled like mirrors, lived a curious boy named Finn and his bouncy penguin pal, Waddle. Finn loved making ice cubes. Every day, he'd fill trays with water, pop them in the freezer, and plop them into his juice. One sunny afternoon, as he dropped a few into his glass, he noticed something funny. "Waddle!" he exclaimed, pointing. "Some ice cubes float higher than others. Are they showing off or racing to the top?" Waddle flapped his flippers and waddled in a circle. "Squawk! Let's find out. It's an icy adventure." With a glass of juice in hand and Waddle toddling beside him, Finn marched through Frostyvale to the frosty cave of Professor Frost, the coolest scientist around. Professor Frost had icicles for a beard and a coat made of snowflakes. He knew everything about ice. "Professor Frost," Finn called, peeking into the cave, "why do some ice cubes float higher?" Professor Frost slid out on an icy chair, grinning. "Ho, ho, Finny and Waddle. That's a chilly question. Come in. I'll tell you the frosty tale." Finn sat on an ice block, and Waddle plopped beside him, puffing frosty breaths. Professor Frost twinkled his icy eyes and began. "Ice cubes are magic little floaters. They're lighter than water, so they bob up like happy balloons. But here's the cool trick. Some float higher because they've got tiny air bubbles trapped inside. When you freeze water, little air pockets get stuck. Pop, pop. And those bubbles make the ice extra bouncy." Finn's mouth dropped. "Air bubbles? Like tiny hugs?" Professor Frost nodded. "Exactly! They're like secret floaty friends," Waddle squawked. "Squawk!" "Why bubbles?" Professor Frost tapped his icy beard. "When water turns to ice, it grabs air from the air around it, or even from fizzy water if you use that. The more bubbles, the higher it floats. Up, up, up. Smooth ice cubes with no bubbles sink a tiny bit lower, but they still float because ice is lighter than water." Finn giggled. "So they're bubble boats?" Professor Frost chuckled. "You got it! The bubbles are like life jackets, keeping them high and happy." Finn swirled his glass, watching one cube bob extra high. "Why don't they all have bubbles?" he asked. Professor Frost winked. "Depends on how you make them. If you stir the water or use fizzy stuff, zing! More bubbles sneak in. Calm water makes smooth ice, but bubbly water? That's a floaty party." Waddle flapped and pecked at the glass. "Squawk! Party ice!" Finn laughed. "Do they pop out?" Professor Frost shook his head. "Nope! They stay trapped until the ice melts. Then poof, they're free." Just then, a breeze whooshed through the cave, and Finn dropped another cube into his juice. Plop! It floated high, wobbling like a dancer. "Look, Waddle, a bubble champ!" Waddle squawked, and waddled around, pretending to float. Professor Frost clapped his icy hands. "See? Every cube's a little different. Some are bubble kings, some are smooth sailors. It's nature's icy game." Finn plopped more cubes in, counting bubbles. 1, 2, up they go. He cheered. Waddle splashed his flipper in a puddle, giggling in penguin style. As the sun dipped low, turning Frostyvale pink, Finn hugged Professor Frost's icy arm. "So some ice floats higher because of air bubbles?" Professor Frost nodded. "That's the frosty truth. They're floaty bubble buddies," Finn grinned. "I love bubbly ice." Waddle squawked back. "Squawk! Me too!" Back home, Finn watched his ice cubes bob, smiling at their tiny bubbles. "Good night, floaty friends," he whispered. Waddle curled up beside him, dreaming of icy races. In Frostyvale, every ice cube was a little floater, and Finn adored their chilly dance.